Today, we are diving into one of the most incredible, top secret, and just plain audacious operations of the entire Cold War. It's a story that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. This is Project Azorian.
So let me just ask you a question that sounds completely insane. How do you steal a submarine, a nuclear submarine, belonging to your biggest enemy?
And it gets crazier. You're not just sneaking into a harbor to snatch it. No, you have to pull it up from 3 miles deep, from the crushing blackness of the Pacific Ocean floor. An engineering feat that was, for all intents and purposes, impossible at the time.
And here is the real kicker. The one detail that makes this whole thing the stuff of legend. You have to do it all in complete secrecy, without the Soviet Union having any idea what you're up to.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The year is 1968. At the height of the Cold War, a Soviet nuclear submarine, the K-129, is out on patrol. And then, poof, it just vanishes without a trace. Now you might be asking, why go to all this trouble? Well, this wasn't just any old sub. K-129 was an absolute intelligence goldmine. We're talking nuclear missiles, yes, but the real prize? The top secret crypto gear and the codebooks. Getting those could give the US a massive advantage in the Cold War. And this part of the story perfectly captures the whole spy versus spy nature of the Cold War. The Soviets launched this huge public search party with dozens of ships, and they found nothing. Meanwhile, the Americans already knew exactly where it was. Their secret underwater listening network called SUSES had heard the sub implode and pinpointed its location. They even sent their own submarine, the USS Halibut, to secretly take thousands of pictures of the wreck. So the CIA has the location, they have pictures of the target, and then they come up with a plan so ridiculously ambitious, so completely out there that it's a miracle it ever got greenlit. They decided they were going to steal it. Just to give you a sense of the sheer insanity of this plan, let's talk numbers. First, the depth. 16,500 feet. That's over 3 miles straight down, deeper than anything had ever been recovered before. And the cost? A staggering $800 million. And remember, that's in 1970s money. We're talking billions today. All for one secret mission. And then there's the weight. The thing they had to lift weighed 1,750 tons. They had to literally invent the technology from scratch to even have a chance of pulling this off. That's how badly they wanted what was on that submarine. This wasn't some rogue operation either. The plan went all the way to the top, to President Richard Nixon himself. And his response was blunt and absolute. We are going to get that submarine. The mission was on. So how in the world were they actually going to do this? Well, the CIA's plan was basically a two-part masterpiece. One part was mind-blowing custom-built technology, and the other was an equally brilliant cover story to hide everything right out in the open. Meet the Glomar Explorer. This ship was a beast, built for one single purpose. Deep inside its hull was a massive hidden chamber called a moon pool. It was basically a giant hole in the bottom of the ship that opened to the ocean, allowing them to bring the sub inside the ship, completely hidden from spy satellites. And to grab the sub, they built a gigantic mechanical claw, nicknamed Clementine, which they would lower 3 miles down on a long string of pipes. But the tech was only half the battle. The cover story? Absolute genius. They told the world the ship was owned by the reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes, a guy famous for his secret projects. And what was his new project? Deep sea mining. Soviet spy ships would literally sail right up to the Glomar Explorer, watch them working, and have no idea they were witnessing the greatest heist in history. They just thought they were looking for rocks. So, the ship is built, the cover story is holding, and in the summer of 1974, it was finally time. The Glomar Explorer sailed to the target location, and the operation began. For weeks, the crew worked around the clock, lowering that claw, piece by piece, 3 miles down into the dark. Using cameras, they guided it into position. The huge metal arms closed around the submarine's hull. It worked. They had it. The slow, incredibly tense journey back to the surface began. They had lifted it over a mile off the ocean floor. They were more than halfway there. Everything was going perfectly. It felt like they were actually going to pull it off. And then, a catastrophic mechanical failure. The stress was just too much.
Several of the claw's giant steel arms snapped.
The main part of the submarine, the section with the missile silos and the code rooms, the grand prize, broke away and plunged back into the abyss, lost forever. But it wasn't a complete failure. They still managed to get a 38-foot section of the sub into the moon pool. Inside, they found 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes, some crucial cryptographic gear, and sadly, the remains of 6 Soviet sailors.
The heist itself was over, but the story of Project Azorian was just beginning. It would go on to leave a huge mark on the world of intelligence, on international law, and even on the strange relationship between these two Cold War superpowers.
And here's where the story takes a truly remarkable turn. The American crew of the Glomar Explorer held a full, formal military burial at sea for the 6 Soviet sailors they recovered. In the middle of the Cold War, these spies honored their fallen enemies with dignity. They even filmed it, and years later, in 1992, the CIA director gave that tape to Russian President Boris Yeltsin.
This timeline really shows you how long this secret was kept. The whole thing was 6 years in the making, and after the operation, the secret held for another year before the story was leaked to the press. But many of the most fascinating details, like that burial at sea, didn't become public knowledge for decades. You know, maybe the project's most lasting legacy is actually a phrase you've probably heard before. When journalists started digging after the leak, the CIA had to figure out how to respond without giving anything away. So they invented the perfect non-answer. We can neither confirm nor deny. It's literally called the Glomar response, and governments and agencies all over the world still use it to this day.
In the end, I think this quote from a former CIA officer just says it all perfectly. Was Project Azorian a success or a failure? Well, the truth is, it was both. It was an unbelievable feat of engineering and spycraft that pushed the absolute limits of what was thought possible, and a powerful reminder that sometimes even the most brilliant plans can break under pressure 3 miles below the sea.